You are listening to Robert Vane's Hegel Podcast.
Perhaps we should not be talking about this.
Oh, no. We're talking about it.
Well, we are certainly going to talk about it. I wanted to introduce just a little explanation of the German word Freiheit, which of course we translate with freedom. Remember, in Greek it's elateria, in Latin it's libertas, that's the ordinary background, the classic language background of Freiheit. But it comes from the Germanic word free and HEIT, which means not just being independent. It signifies the absence of constraint. But free originally in the Indo-Germanic languages, it means something like to love, to take care of, to deal with something. And we have that basic meaning in words like friyen, which means to love, or freien, or frieten, to be a friend, to be free. All these words of Friede, peace, and freund, friend, all have to do with this Gothic term friyen. And the basis of that is, of course, then free. What does Freiheit mean in German? Well, it's the possibility to act as you want. So the concept of freedom entails also arbitrariness. It's arbitrary freedom, the arbitrary will. So it is in opposition to necessity as well as constraint. In a much more philosophical sense, Freiheit is the possibility of a human being to determine himself, in opposition to being dependent on the power of other people. That man acts freely, whose actions have only causes within himself. So, just simply causes within yourself lead to the actions that you take. There is no cause outside of yourself, only internal causation. Freedom in that sense is opposed to constraint, but not necessarily opposed to necessity. Freedom is never absolute. The determination of the material and the social surroundings is important. Inner commitments, moral obligations with regard to family and society do provide us with a constraint, a restriction to the exercise of freedom in this sense of arbitrary freedom. And of course we must say that the connections to others in family and society do create the possibility of a true self-determination, and in that sense freedom is actually made possible by those institutions that restrict my freedom. Freedom also presupposes the voluntary recognition of what is necessary. But even beyond that, freedom is actually a moral concept. It's about what is valuable in our conduct, in our actions. The opposite of this doctrine of freedom we find in the doctrine of predestination or in fatalism. And of course, there is finally also a political meaning to the word freedom. It means the independence of a people with a state over against the arbitrary volitions, the arbitrary freedom of individuals. That's the concept of the social contract. So the arbitrary freedom of the individual cannot dictate to a people that have a state how it should act. That is the concept of freedom, Freiheit in German.
You are listening to Robert Vane's Hegel podcast.
Perhaps we should not be talking about this.
Oh, no. We're talking about this.